Hello and a good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to you if you are in this side of on this side of the world, North Africa, South Africa, Europe, and a good morning to you if you're in the Americas. I hope you slept well, and I hope that you are having a good week. Today we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. So I'm answering the question today of polygamy, the questions of polygamy and polyamory, what the differences are between the two. And maybe we're going to go into the causes as to why people practice both. Why is humanity uh why has humanity always leaned towards having multiple expressions and manifestations of love relationships? But specifically, my goal is to explain the difference between the two, between polygamy and polyamory. So let's get started by just looking at a few things. For example, if we look at the etymology of polygamy, the Western world, the language of the Western world is based on Greek. Okay. So Greek is the basis. The Greek language is the basis of the language of the Western world, which receives an overlay from Latin. All right. So if language was a painting or if language was a work of art, it would have a foundation and it would have an overlay, something that makes it a little bit more, something that brings out the meaning of the foundation. So you have the Greek language and the Latin language, and eventually this leads us to the English and other Western languages that are spoken. And of course, the world speaks more English than any other Western language. So, and study is done in English, and all the etymology in all these languages takes us back to Greek somehow or Latin. Anyways, enough blah blah. So we have polygamy. And of course, in Greek, poly means many or numerous. And both polygamy and polyamory, we have the poly as maybe I'll call it a prefix. And it literally means marrying lots in English, right? In everyday average person English, spoken English in the street, it means lots, marrying lots. And it's an act of marrying. So if you're a polygamist, you do the act of marrying a few times or many times, depending on what a lot means for you. And polygamy is not polygamy without marriage. Okay? So we're working with etymology and definitions for now. Polygamy, marrying lots. The optimal word here being marriage. So this is within marriage, which means an agreement between two people to live their lives together. So this is legal. This is legal because there's an agreement between people. And this becomes legal in two ways: by religious law and by cultural norms. Because a marriage is not a marriage without the witness of the marriage by the society. So marriage always requires a witness or two witnesses that these people indeed have agreed to be together. Marriage does not need you to go to church or to go to a synagogue to get married. Marriage is between two people and the approval of one or two witnesses, mother, father, friends. And of course, this happens under the watchful eye of God. God sees that you've made a decision, and when you decide to get married and be together, God approves this marriage. You don't need to go to church, you don't need to go to a civil court, you don't need anything. When a man and a woman decide they want to become a family, By definition, that is marriage before God. You don't need a wedding. You don't need rings. You don't need anything. Just the agreement that you are now man and woman in the eyes of God that makes you a marriage. What religion does is religion over here brings a form of dignity. It tries to dignify the union, but the religion cannot define the union because it is defined by God and the decisions made by the two people. Indeed, in Jewish marriage or weddings, you don't need a rabbi. Yes, a rabbi features a lot in Western Jewish norms, um, but you don't even need a rabbi. You just need a friend or someone. They don't have to be a man. They don't have to be a woman. Just someone to witness, to be a witness to what you're doing. And then you become man and woman. Polyamory, on the other side, to have many loves, literally many loves, right? To have, specifically, to have many lovers, more specifically, to have many lovers. This happens outside of marriage. So there's no marriage in polyamory, not in the beginning, anyways. So it begins outside of marriage. Whereas polygamy immediately starts with marriage, but you marry lots. Polyamory, you have many loves initially, and to have many loves, if you ask me personally, to love many people is not a sin. It's not a sin to love people. You must love people. Before a man gets married or a woman gets married, they've had to have loved many people. And then they choose that I'm going to marry this guy or I'm going to marry this girl. It doesn't mean that you don't love the other people or you never fell in love with the other people that you did not choose. Of course, you fell in love with them. But polyamory is a little bit different because it doesn't start with marriage, it starts with physicality, right? So polyamory starts with physicality. So David makes out with Miriam and forms a romantic affiliation to Miriam. And then David loves Jessica, so in polyamory, you have more love interests. Now, I want to clarify something to you. I don't believe that loving many people is a sin or it is wrong. But when you introduce physicality, you cannot be physically involved with many people if the M word does not exist. The M word, marriage, is the carte blanche to physicality. So far in polyamory, to have many lovers is a different definition to have many loves. To have many loves, excellent. You love people, nothing wrong. But when these people become lovers, which means physicality, then there's a problem if the M word is not introduced. So you have more love interests. Typically in the Western world, polyamory does not exist in the Eastern world. Okay. So polygamy is number 3 is Afro-Asiatic. It's an Afro-Asiatic culture. What does Afro-Asiatic mean? Plain and simple, it's an Eastern tradition. Oopsie daisy. What am I doing? Let me just use a eraser rather. So Afro-Asiatic means it's East. What does it mean that it's an Eastern tradition? Basically, all the way from Africa, all the way from Africa to the land of the rising sun, Japan. uh, as far east as Australia, because indigenous Australians are Afro-Asiatic people. Aboriginals are, entre comillas, inverted commas, they are African because of their African roots, the Aboriginals of Australia. So it's an Afro-Asiatic culture all the way from Africa to the far east, from the land of the rising sun, whether you consider that to be Japan or Australia or some Polynesian island. Uh, Basically, I'm just trying to give you direction here. And polyamory is a it's a Western norm. It's not a norm, actually. Uh, I'm going to call it a quirk. It's a Western quirk. Now, why do I make this comparison? It's because everything that we do on earth has a meaning. If you want to understand things from God's perspective and from an original humanistic perspective, you must go east. The Bible tells us if you want to find God and good things, go east. If you want godlessness and extreme liberalism and paganism of an extreme nature, go west. Bible tells us you want God, go east. If you go west, you're getting lost. It's that easy. It's that simple. So polyamory is physicality with many people, more love interests. It's a Western quirk, and it's based on Western norms, for example, orgies. So in polyamory, there are orgies, meaning well, actually, yeah, there are orgies, but I think I'm being harsh if I just say orgies. Let me say, let me use the term, let me use the term to swing, right? So polyamory is kind of like a swingers club. It starts off like a swingers club, or it can just be a group of people, right? Small group of people. Usually maybe uh one man, three women, or maybe one woman, three men, who knows? So it's a small group. Polygamy deals with houses and families. So in polyamory, we have different people uh, having sexual and love experiences. So instead of having one girlfriend or one lover, you've got multiple lovers, and all of you are loving each other. And it goes many ways. It's not just the two men that are loving this one woman. It also happens that these two men also in inverted commas love one another. So it introduces again that word I didn't want to use, but I think I'm forced to use that word orgy. Because in these relationships, these men, they don't just sleep with the woman, they sleep with each other as well. It's one big thing, right? Whereas polygamy, the whole point of polygamy is to establish houses and families. In polygamy, by the way, the Bible doesn't call it polygamy. I'm just using the English language here. The Bible doesn't even make it a thing. It's a normal thing, polygamy in the Bible, because you're fulfilling the commandment to fill the world with humanity, with many humans. So in polygamy, you're creating many houses, families. Uh, Number five, you are um, increasing the human population. You're increasing the human population, which is a commandment directly from the Bible. One woman can never mother a nation in a single generation or in 2 generations. It takes a while. So women who are open to sharing their husbands, they fulfill this commandment. There's actually a blessing in it because you are increasing the population. In polyamory, people express their sexual desires. People are expressing their sexual desires. And there's a kind of innocence in polyamory where people are not selfish. They want to share the love that they experience with their boyfriend or girlfriend with someone else. The sexual relationship, the intimacy, they want to share it to someone else. So initially, this is not weird. Polyamory is not weird initially. It has a good intention, but people are going about that good intention in the wrong way. And in polygamy, the same thing. Polygamy is not determined by the man, right? Polygamy is not set up or determined by the man. The woman chooses the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth wife. So what happens in polygamy is this woman shares her husband with other women because she is selfless. She's not selfish. If you look at the Western society today in the West, right? If you look at the West today and women, it's all about me, 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 me. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. So in the West, there's a focus on me plus myself, rather like that. It's me, myself, and I. That's why in the West, 70% of all divorces are initiated by women, which is why in the West, almost 80% of men say no to marriage. They just want to sleep with the person and have them as a partner. And if the relationship works, it might survive. And if the relationship doesn't work, obviously they'll move on to another person and have multiple partners. But they don't see benefit. The men in the West don't see benefit in marriage anymore because of the me, myself, and I culture of the Western woman. So in the West, people are extremely selfish. It's all about what I can get out of the relationship. In the East, we see a different culture of selflessness. People are selfless. So a woman typically in the East has a lot of responsibilities, which is one is childbearing, making a house, looking after children, cooking, washing, cleaning. There's a lot of responsibilities. So the Afro-Asiatic woman, she doesn't have to be African. She can even be Chinese or even Filipina. It's all about shared responsibilities. That's why Islam, for example, became so popular in the East and Indonesia, Philippines, wherever, because Islam, although it's not an Eastern religion, it is created by Christianity, it appealed to the Eastern traditions. Because you must remember, the Arabians, the Arabs, did not accept Christianity and specifically Catholicism because they did not believe in idols and especially the Virgin Mary. So the church created Islam for them, a Catholic religion that appeals to their sense of culture and identity. That's why Islam has conquered the East, because it appeals to the culture. So my point in sharing this little bit is that in the East or in Afro-Asiatic countries, people share responsibilities. So if you read the story of the Bible, especially with regards to our patriarch, our father Abraham, Avraham or Abraham, peace be upon him, um, Sarai, who became Sarah, his wife, she couldn't bear children. She didn't say, I don't want to be your wife anymore because I cannot have children. She just couldn't bear children. She was barren at the time. And she said, why don't you have children with my servant Hagar? And obviously, Abraham did what his wife wished. And and he made Hagar the Egyptian slave woman. Now, when I say slave woman, I don't mean like slavery as you know it today, but the servant of the household. She was the servant of the household. Let me just open myself a few pages here so that I don't run out of space. So when I say slave, I mean she was a household servant. So he has a child with her, and his name is Ishmael. And all our cousins, Ishmaelites are our cousins, and they are the ones whom Rome made Islam for, right? So that is why in Islam and in the Arab culture, polygamy is very, very normal because it is based on an African tradition. It is based on a biblical tradition. Rabbis from Europe might not agree with what I'm saying, but to be fair and honest, European rabbis and European Jews have no experience with polygamy. Polygamy is practiced today by Spanish Jews and North African Jews and Jews from the East world, from the Arab world. The European Jews were prohibited to practice polygamy 1,000 years ago by a rabbi named Rabbi Gershom, who outlawed polygamy. And I assume he did so because these Jews were living in Western Europe, where it is frowned upon to have many wives. But let's examine Western Europe. In Western Europe, which is based on the Greek culture, the Greek men, for pleasure, they slept with Greek men and boys. This was like pleasure, and they called it education, right? So they called it education. Supposedly, it brought trust. Today, we understand it's abuse. But anyways, and homosexuality, and in the case of boys, it is plain abuse. But the Greek society was like this. The Greeks slept with other men for sexual pleasure, and they came back to sleep with the women in Greek culture. The women only served one function, to be childbearers. So the woman, oops, the women in Greek culture served one purpose: to look after the house, to cook, and to become a childbearer, nothing else. She couldn't become anything. So the Greek society was very, very, what's the word? Misogynic? No. Uh, I can't think of the adjective, but misogyny comes from the Greek culture. The Western world always attacks Eastern cultures and Eastern people, and they try and shame us for our cultural norms, and they call it misogyny. Yes, there's an element of misogyny, especially in African culture and Arabic culture, but by definition, misogyny and by origin comes from the Greek culture, not from us. Because women were only for bearing children, and sexual pleasure was associated with men and boys, which is very, very strange. But we don't judge, right? And so when the Romans conquered the Greeks and imposed their culture, uh, with the Romans, you had to have one wife, right? This is by Roman law. You have one wife. But in the Roman world, there's cheating or unfaithfulness. We call it cheating today. It's just plain unfaithfulness. What does that mean? It means that in the Roman world, in the Western world, post-Greek dominance, in the Western world, a man must have one wife. But what is the most common thing in the Western world is that a married man will have sexual relations with a uh, today we have a weird name coming from America, a weird word, which is a side chick, right? That's from American culture. But there's another ah in English proper, it's a mistress, right? So a married man has a mistress, and the married woman knows that her husband has a mistress, but she has no problem putting down the Eastern people or the Afro-Asian people as maybe barbarians or uneducated or backwards for being polygamist or for having many wives. So this is why polygamy exists in the Bible. It's because the side chick is unholy. The mistress is unholy. If a man desires another woman, he should speak to his wife, and if his wife approves, she must choose the second wife. So in the biblical world, which is the Afro-Asiatic world, the woman chooses the woman chooses number one. Oops. The woman chooses number one, the wife or the second wife, right? And the wife chooses the concubine. The perfect description of a concubine is someone who assumes sexual responsibility. For example, in the Western, actually, let me save my space there because I might need it. In the Eastern world, men don't sleep with women when women are menstruating. So when the woman is menstruating, in the Eastern world, we don't touch the woman for 12 days. So who's going to be attending to the man's sexual needs during the 12 days? So the woman chooses the second wife, and she chooses the concubine, which is very wrongly called a slave. You must remember that a slave today, what we call a slave today, is not a slave that the Bible talks about. The slave that a Bible talks about is a domestic worker who gets a lot of benefits. He or she gets food fed by the master. He or she has a percentage of the master's wealth, and he or she goes free as a slave every 7 years. So there's an immense benefit in being a biblical slave than being a slave today by today's definition. So the woman in the East chooses the second wife and the concubine because the concubine has to assume all sexual responsibilities if if the woman of the house is not able to provide that to her husband. This could happen because of hormonal changes or because she has too many responsibilities. And especially in the old Eastern world, there were no washing machines, no dishwashers, there were no convenience stores, there were no supermarkets. You had to go out and fetch wood and water. It was a lot of work, and then you still have to come home and satisfy your husband sexually. This was too much. So concubines played a role in that society. And obviously the second wife. who shared their responsibilities, as we saw there. She shares their responsibilities with the wife, with the first wife. And the woman chooses all the wives that this man will have. So in the biblical world, the man cannot say, I desire this woman, that woman, that woman. No. He expresses his desire for more before he marries the woman. So as an Afro-Asiatic man, black or Asian, or in today's terminology, as a brown person, which is also very racist, by the way, that term, as a brown person, you don't go and say, I want to marry Suraya or Khadija or whoever is my second, third wife, or Miriam or whatever. Inside the marriage, you don't do it inside the marriage. You express your desire to have many wives before you get married in your marital contract. So when you sign your ketubah or your marital contract with your first wife, uh, so Afro-Asiatic or polygamy is contractual, very contractual. And because it is contractual, again, it is legal. God made it like this so that it is legal. God made it contractual so that it becomes legal. And the second and third woman, they get the same benefits. So all wives have the same benefits. What are these same benefits? For example, equal. Why do I keep writing a G instead of Q? So equal finances. A man distributes his finances, his earnings, according to the number of wives that he has. So if you earn $1,000, you divide it by $2,000 times 5. Because biblically speaking, a man can only have a man can only have 5 wives maximum. According to the Bible, he can only have 5 women maximum, no more. If you are a king, you can have 17 women maximum and no more. That's the biblical limit. King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines because all of these wives, most of them, were peace offerings. They were to make peace between Israel and other nations so that there's no war. There were tokens of peace. And of course, the concubines are a king's privilege. He is privileged to have his concubines. It's biblical as well. And if you're wondering why God would give a man 300 women to sleep with on top of his wives, has God gotten his wires twisted? No. I want to remind you of a story in the Bible. The story in the Bible, of course, concerns King David when he sees Uriah's wife bathing on the rooftop, and he sees her body, and he's immediately enamored by her body, and he hatches a plan to get Uriah the soldier killed so that he can marry Bathsheba. So when he does get Uriah killed, he's obviously committed a sin, and the prophet Nathan or Nathan comes to visit King David, and he says, "What is this evil thing that you have done, killing a man and taking his wife? Don't you know?" And I'm quoting the prophet. The prophet says, "Don't you know that if you wanted more wives, if it was more wives that you wanted, God would have given them to you." All right? Number 11, God gives extra wives. And the example is who? King David. So the prophet Nathan says to King David, don't you know that, didn't you know, or don't you know that if it was more wives that you needed, God would have given them to you? Why do you go and kill a man, commit such a bad sin for you to have that woman as your wife? God could have given you so many other women. But of course, even David's sin with Bathsheba, we know that was God's plan because from it, the wisest king was born, which is King Solomon. Anyways, so in the East or in the biblical world, the woman chooses the second wife, the wife chooses the second and the third, etc., etc. In the case of King David, he made the mistake of choosing for himself Bathsheba, and that led him to sin. Maybe had he spoken to Abigail, his first wife, she would have chosen uh, even Bathsheba. Maybe Uriah would have died naturally in war because he was a warrior. Maybe Abigail would have chosen Bathsheba. Who knows? God's plans are not our plans. But anyways, the woman chooses the husband. In polyamory in the West, the man chooses his mistress, right? The man chooses his mistress, uh, and also the woman chooses her lover, right? So it's two people who look at each other and they're like, we want to have something going on. So they make a choice among themselves, and all of this is extramarital. It's so important to understand that all of this is extramarital. It's not within marriage. This is outside of marriage. The biblical stuff is inside of marriage. So the concubine here assumes sexual responsibilities in the Western world. In polyamory, it's uh, it's a multiplication. It's a multiplication of an act of pleasure. And it's also selfish. It's what I want. How can you say it's selfish when you said in the beginning that it comes from an innocent desire? Well, it comes from an innocent desire to multiply the sexual gratification or to share it with someone else, but it is also selfish in this case where I want to sleep with Tony tonight. I don't want to sleep with Mark, or I don't want to sleep with Deborah tonight. I want to sleep with so and so, right? So it's all about pleasure. In today's world, or in today's polyamory, there's this culture of I want to watch. People don't want to take part in love, in making love. They say they want to watch. Maybe this is because of pornography, I don't know, but people take pleasure in watching. This is all pleasure. This is all pleasure based. Polyamory is all about pleasure, while polygamy is all about all of these things of contractual agreements and sexual responsibilities. This concerns community. This is all about community and family. Community, humanity, and family. As an African person, as an African man, I'm a product of polygamy 3 generations ago. 3 generations ago in my family, there were 4 houses. What does that mean, 4 houses? My ancestor had 4 wives. But in Africa, in modern days, this has not been done correctly. This polygamy has not been done correctly because in Africa, the woman does not choose. It's the man who imposes upon the woman many wives. in the African tradition. And this is not good. Rabbis might disagree with me, maybe, but this is my understanding of it, that the woman always has to be the one who initiates polygamy. If a man imposes polygamy, many times it will bring problems upon the family. The first wife will get jealous. There's going to be hatred between the children of the first wife and the second and the third and the fourth. That whole family, people are going to want to kill each other because they have received unequal benefits because this polygamist situation was not done according to biblical dictates. It was done according to cultural norms. So in Africa, the woman cannot choose the second wife, the man chooses. The man does not distribute his wealth equally. And most importantly, the man wants all the women to live within the same yard. You cannot live in the same yard or in the same house. Biblical polygamy, each wife, right? So there's extra, you've got equal finances. Each wife has her own house. Each wife has her own house. So if you marry four women or five women, you're going to build how many homes? You're going to build four houses. All these houses are going to be the same size. Four houses, same size, same style. If you're going to buy clothing for your wives, you buy at the same time. Equal clothing across all your wives, the same quality all across the board. When you get paid at the end of the month, you take your salary and you divide it by four times, by four households, so that all your children and all your wives receive the same amount of resources. If you're gonna buy a house for your first wife, or a car, sorry, not a house, a car for your first wife, you're not gonna buy her a Range Rover and then buy the other three wives a VW Polo. You're not gonna do that. You're gonna buy four Range Rovers or five Range Rovers, depending on how many wives do you have. And most importantly, they never live under the same roof. If you want problems, all your wives must live under the same house, the same big house. You are going to have problems. So in the Muslim tradition and the African tradition, what usually happens is in a situation when a man has many wives, they build a massive compound and a massive house with many rooms and corridors and whatever. That is still under the same roof. You cannot put your wives and your many children under the same roof. You must have four separate houses. So that makes polygamy very expensive. Sorry, 13. Polygamy is very expensive. You must be very rich. In the old biblical times, it was easy to be rich because your wealth was not measured by how much money you've got. It was measured by gold, silver, copper, and animals, how many animals you had. So if I was a man and I had 1,000 sheep, I was very rich. It means that I can feed my family for generations because I have sheep. We get milk, we get cheese, we get meat, we get to barter, exchange. So I would have been a very wealthy man with 1,000 sheep. Men who had 1,000 herd of cattle or cows, even more richer than the man who has sheep, you know? So it goes on and on and on like that. But in today's world where everybody receives a salary, I think that in today's world, to be a successful polygamist, uh, you would have to earn, let's look at South African terms. If you live in South Africa, I would say to be a successful polygamist, you have to be earning plus minus 3 million rands, 3 million a year, so that you have no problems. At least 3 million. Now, somebody's going to laugh at me and say, well, look at the rest of Africa. They don't earn nowhere near 3 million rands. How can you say uh how can you say that a person needs to earn that much? Look at us in our country. I'm a poor man. I have many wives. Yes. In many countries in Africa, men have many wives, but the children are extremely poor. There's extreme poverty. They've done the right thing by having many children or having children, but if you cannot feed them and look after them, I believe that it does more harm than good. It's not advisable. It's not wrong. There's nothing that says it's wrong. But for me, my feelings are that it's not fair. It's not good. You need to have the financial resources not only to build these four houses for your wives and divide your wealth equally, but because your children from four or five wives, you may have 20 to 30 or 40 children. And these children have to go to university as well. So maybe you're South African and you divide this by four, each household gets about 500,000. That's enough for them to live a comfortable life. But from 1 million rand, this is 1 million divided by four. You have to think about university, all right? Your children have to go to university. It is not good to be uneducated. Children have to go to university. So this other 2 million, you have to invest it so that when your 40 children are older, they can go to university times 40 children. So you have to think about it. You have to calculate. This is not about your sexual desires. Biblical polygamy is not about sexual desires. It is not about what you want, your greed. It is about creating humans. It is about creating nations and household. From one man and five women, you have 40 children. That's 40 different families. And you times this by another 40, you can imagine how many human beings one man and five wives have brought into the world. And this fulfills God's commandment to multiply and fill the earth. This is biblical stuff. This is holy stuff. Polygamy is holy. Polyamory is to satisfy your sexual desires. So in US dollars today, I would say if you wanted to have four wives, in US dollars, you have to at least earn 400,000 minimum per month. And you do the same thing. You divide it by your number of households, 100,000 for every household, which is more than enough to live an okay life. You're not going to be rich, but it's an okay life in the United States. And of course, you have to think about university, which is $40,000 a month. So you have 40 children, 40,000, not $40,000 a month, 40,000 US dollars a year. So you have 40 children times 40,000 US dollars per year for 40 children. You can do the maths. So in 20 years of, let's say your career is 20 years, you have to put away all of this money so that your children and your children's children do not go hungry. So you've created a nation. 40 people is a nation. You've created this nation. Now you must fund this nation. You must give them wealth. You cannot create a nation without wealth. Which is why in the Jewish world, a lot of Jewish people obviously came from polygamous relationships, and the Jewish people have an immense amount of wealth because it is generational, because they didn't just make babies with many women, they transferred the wealth as well. In Europe, they stopped doing this. 1,000 years ago, in other parts of the world, Jews still continued polygamy. I believe that in some places in Israel, you still have polygamous Jews, or in other parts of the world. But what today's Judaism is trying to do is to conform to Western norms. Judaism is trying to become Westernized. This cannot work because to go west is to go against God. To go east is to go towards God. So not everything in Western Judaism or not everything in mainstream Judaism today is biblical. Not everything is Jewish. You have to read the Jewish books to retain original Judaism. You can listen to a rabbi like for 5 years and still not connect with the original Judaism. You have to make the time to learn Hebrew and learn the biblical Judaism. If you're a Christian, do yourself a favor, learn Hebrew so that you can learn the Bible and know the right thing. So in the Western world, we have this polyamory, people sharing, right? So it's a shared sexual pleasure and fantasy, right? Shared sexual pleasure, shared fantasies. Most importantly, polyamory is open, is open to disease, open to separation. It's pretty much open to anything. In other words, there are no real boundaries unless people sign contracts among themselves, but it's pretty much open to any corruption that comes. But most importantly, a big difference is it's open to uh, two or more men. So by definition, this is not a marriage. Now let's come to the equalizing question. The equalizing question would be, why is a woman in society called a whore if she has multiple male partners, but a man is called a stud if he has multiple women? In other words, gender equality says if a man can have many women, then a woman can have many men. This is not biblically feasible, and I'll tell you why. It's because when a man gets married, a man is equal to a name. A name is equal to a nation. A woman, a woman takes on the name of the man. A woman takes the name and she becomes a nation. Multiple women take the name of the man and they create nations according to God's instruction in the Bible. When a woman has multiple men, so woman plus many men equals many names. All right. What does this mean? It means she belongs to no one. She belongs to no one. Immediately, this causes chaos. When a man takes on a name, when a woman takes on a man's name, she becomes that man's nation. For example, the nation of Israel, right? So every child born from all these women that take one name, they become a nation of Israel. The foundation of the nation of Israel are men married to multiple women. Rebecca and Leah, for example. Jacob also made children with Zilpah and Hagar, the two African women. So these women took on the name of Jacob and produced Jewish people or Israelites. If, for example, Sarah had multiple husbands, she would not have received the letter Hey in her name because the letter Hey or the letter H in Abraham and Sarah is God's name. So God put his name in the name of Abraham and Sarah. So Abraham's name and Sarah are what? at God's identity. So a woman takes a man's name as the human being who's called an Israelite or a Jew takes on the name of God. It's not God who takes our name. It's not God who becomes a nation. We become the nation of God. So the women, we as the Israelite people, we as the Jewish people, metaphorically are the wife of God. So we carry the feminine. The feminine must gravitate to the masculine. It is not the masculine that gravitates and multiplies itself towards the feminine. So if a woman has many, many names, she does not have a nation or a household. She is everybody's something. That makes her to become a whore. That makes her to become a prostitute because there's a state of chaos in her life. There's no order. So in polyamory, there's no order. There's only chaos. But these people cannot see this chaos because it's masked by their sexual pleasure. Ultimately, it's a chaos with no commitment. So what do we do with black men in the United States of America today that have awoken rather to their blackness or to their African roots, which are Israelite and biblical? Instead of having many wives and having co-wives, please marry these women. Okay, so in America, I'm speaking to black men in America. No more co-wives. Okay, this this co-wives has to give way to wives. Period. As you guys say, we say full stop. You guys say period. So no co-wives. These are your wives, determined wives. Okay, they are not your secret. They're not your dirty secret. They are your determined wives, which means you know them and you are not ashamed of them. My phone's ringing. Let's see who's giving me a call. I beg your pardon. Spam call again. So, anyways, these are your wives. So, what should you do now in America as a black man whose first wife has asked for a second wife, or maybe you asked your wife for a second wife? Then you must divide your household. Please divide your household. What do I mean by divide your household? Now you need to rent or buy two, three, four properties. It doesn't, if you have two wives, please don't have two wives, have three. Because when you have two wives, we've learned through our forefather Jacob that Rebecca and Leah at some stage were competition to each other. So if you have two wives, there's a risk that they will compete amongst themselves. So the Talmud teaches us that if you're going to have two, add number three so that it becomes a community and no one is fighting among themselves. Okay? So please, instead of two, add one, have three. And please divide your households. What does this mean? It means that you are going to now have to rent two or three more houses for each wife to live with her children. And you are going to move around those houses so that your relationship with each wife is personalized and the attention and love you give to each wife is also personalized. Number three, polygamy, biblical polygamy today asks us to consider the laws of the land. In America and Canada, polygamy is illegal in most Christian countries. So since it's illegal, don't do it. No polygamy. No polygamy if the law of the land says no. Okay? Because if you break the law of the land, it is equal to breaking the Torah, the biblical law. So if you're American and you cannot have multiple women in America, consider moving to another country that will allow you to have polygamy or to become a polygamist. Um, don't do it where it's prohibited because it will bring God's name into disrepute. Because as Israelites and Jews, we are obligated to observe the law of the land. At the same time, these things are outside of our control. They're always in God's control. So if you feel God wants you to have that wife, second, third wife, do it. But find a state in your country that will back you legally with this, or consult a lawyer to find out if you can do it legally, given your religious convictions. But in most places around the world, the Western culture frowns upon having many wives, but it's a very hypocritical culture because it says have one wife, but you can have as many lovers and mistresses as you want, which is a double standard and absolute hypocrisy. But you must respect the laws of your lands. This is very important. This is why the Jews of Europe were prohibited 1,000 years ago by Rabbi Gershom to not have polygamy anymore because it was frowned upon and it was outlawed in Europe, while it was not outlawed, obviously, in places like Africa and the East. So you might have to move countries in order to have a fruitful polygamist marriage. In my view, it's not a polygamist marriage, it's a marriage. Polygamy is not a biblical word. Polygamy is not a biblical concept. Marrying lots is not a biblical concept. It's a Western perspective. In the Bible, it's simply called marriage, and your many wives are simply called your family. That's all there is to it. All right. So the wives have a determined household, whereas in polyamory, everybody everybody sleeps in the same bed. All right, so everybody sleeps in the same bed, which is basically an orgy. The word I didn't want to use, but that's what it is. And obviously, there is no long-term commitment, and usually there's no children, and there's no children because this is about pleasure. It's not about creating generations or nations, right? So it is very, very unbiblical compared to polygamy. And then, of course, one last word about polygamy is obviously that it is not polygamy. Polygamy is English. It's just language. In the Bible, it's called one, it is a family. Two, uh, it is a marriage. Three, this is building nations. You're building a nation. The Bible says yes, yes, and yes. But before you get carried away and be like, yay, I can have many wives, the golden rules, right? So let me do the golden rules here. These are the golden rules, and this is my counsel to you. If you do this, you will be a successful husband to many wives. If you don't do this, you are going to be a miserable husband and you're going to wish you were dead. Golden rule number one, wife. Before we even have a wife, golden rule number one, create a marriage contract with your first wife. Create a marriage contract with the first wife. In the contract, find out if she wants or she would accept a second wife or not. If she says no, and you know you're going to want a second wife, please don't marry her. Go find another one. Because if she says no, and then you bring a second wife, you've ruined your marriage. Because all these other wives, they pivot on your first marriage as a foundation. Your wife has the power to say yes or no. So if your wife says, the woman you're going to marry says, I don't want a second wife, that's it. You decide if you want to marry her or not. It is very cruel. Listen to me very carefully. I don't have authority to say this, but it doesn't matter what your rabbi might say. I want to tell you from personal experience or from my own personal feelings that it is a very cruel thing to do to make your wife jealous with a mistress or a woman that you are cheating with. It's like murder. It's like you're killing her. And you're also killing your children. You're killing your kids. Don't do that. Don't do the mistress thing. If you are already married and now you want a second wife, out of the question. If you are married and you want a second wife, out of the question, because you did not have a marriage contract with your wife that stipulates that you will want a second wife. So please, before you marry her, write out that contract with your expectations and your desires, and let her approve or disapprove. So number one, create a marriage contract with the first wife stating that you want a second woman and she must say yes or no. Number two, let her know. Let her know that you have the tendency to love more women. You love abundantly. Let her know that you have the potential to love more people so that she can know from the beginning what kind of man she's going to marry. So create the marriage contract. Let her know that you might want someone else in the relationship. Number three, sign the agreement. Sign the agreement and stick to it. Your marriage is going to be guided and governed by this agreement, by this contract called the ketubah. These are the golden rules. Number four, have wealth. This is the difference between a mess up and a resounding success. If you want, a family of many people, many wives around one man, many children born of this relationship is a tremendous holy blessing. But if you don't have wealth, you have a tremendous disaster and endless conflicts because you cannot satisfy the needs of your family. You cannot meet them. So have wealth and then distribute this wealth equally. In other words, financial planning. And your first wife is going to help you with all of this if she thinks it's a good idea. If your first wife thinks it's a good idea, your marriages are going to be unbelievably happy. If she thinks it's a bad idea, it's going to be doomed from day one. And the reason why I'm doing this video is because I understand that there are women who want a multiplied family setting. They want to share their husbands with someone else. And there are husbands who love so much that they wish to love a big family. So it's not a coincidence. We could call it a God incidence, but now I'm giving you the framework within which to work. So you need to distribute your wealth equally and do some financial planning. Equal households. Let's start with equal housing. Same house, same neighborhood, 4 times or 5 times. Uh, Equal benefits. Equal everything, but most importantly, equal sexual attention. You have to be very fit and prepared to go and do your job in all four houses throughout the week. Now that you see that everything is equal, here's the most important one, and I'll speak about it just now. Equal, not equal, equal spiritual nurture. What does this mean, spiritual nurture? Those of you who come from Christianity, you would be familiar with a teaching by a rabbi named Paul, who said that a man with many wives cannot be a deacon in the congregation. What is a deacon? A deacon is a strange word that comes from the Greek. In the Jewish setting, he is called the master of the synagogue. The master of the synagogue is the person who goes and maintains the synagogue inside. He goes to the Torah scroll and he opens it for the following Sabbath reading, the Haftarah and the Torah. He organizes the people who are going to be singing, the people who are going to be chanting, the people who are going to be reading the Aliyot or the Aliyah, in which is the portion of the Bible. So the master of the synagogue has got extra family work, which means he has to do duties in the community. If a man, a master of the synagogue, has got many wives, it means he's got many children. So his own house is a synagogue. He is a master of the synagogue in his own home. He is responsible for the spiritual growth of each member of the family, from his many wives to his many children. He is the spiritual father. He's not just a father figure to satisfy his own ego. He is doing God's work by raising these souls to become worshippers of God. So if you are a man who's a polygamist, you must be invested in your family 100%. 100%. Your job is not to look for other wives. 100% devotion to each member of the family, child or wife. So you become a rabbi. When you become a polygamist, you become a rabbi, the rabbi of your family. You become the chazan of your family. You become the teacher, the educator of your family. It's a massive responsibility. On the side of polyamory, basically the end of polyamory is judgment, God's judgment. I'm not going to call you a sinner because I'm a human. Who am I to call you a sinner? Only God can call you that. So I don't judge you, but definitely God will judge you. So judgment is the end. Often there is heartbreak. That's the end of this relationship. And obviously diseases around, sexual diseases, STIs, sexually transmitted infections will rule this relationship. So there's no real blessing there. So, as most of you have asked me these questions, you're already in a marriage situation, but you love many women. And of course, you've got no existing contract with your wives about what you're going to do with your relationship with your marriage, now that you have another relationship on the side. I would say to you that speak to your wife. If your wife is open to the idea that you have another woman, elevate this relationship with your mistress. Marry her. Make her number two. Don't keep her a secret. Make her public. Make her number two. Now that she's number two, the Talmud or our culture dictates that you must have number three, so that this woman is not a rival to your wife, but an addition to your family. So between her and your wife, they have to choose you a third wife so that you have a balance and you have less conflicts in your marriage, right? If you decide to let her go, from my understanding, I'm not referring to Judaism or the Talmud, but from my understanding, if this mistress, this woman has been your mistress for many years, you need to give her a financial package. You need to give her a percentage of your wealth because all these years you have been using her as your wife. So please give her a percentage of your net worth, right? So your mistress, you need to give her a percentage of your net worth in monetary terms. Okay? Give her a percentage of your net worth. I don't know how much you're gonna give her, but you need to give her a substantial net worth because you've been using her as a wife all these years. Final, a final thought from Jewish law are temporary marriages. And then I'm gonna end this video. In the Jewish world, in the biblical world, in Jewish law, you have temporary marriages and they are legal and they are recognized. Temporary marriage typically maybe 2 to 5 years, maybe more, maybe 7 years. In these temporary marriages, there's a marriage contract, there's a ketubah. The woman gets full benefits as a wife, and then when the 5 years expire, the two people separate. Jewish law approves of this. And then when the woman obviously leaves you, she leaves you with benefits like children, maybe. And of course, if she has children, you have to feed those children. So you have to give her providence, which is your net worth for those 5 years that she's been with you. And of course, you have to continually maintain the children. So temporary marriages are a thing. They are actually biblical. They are there in Jewish law. Okay? Maybe you might want to call it a concubine or whatever, but it is a temporary marriage, even though she's your concubine and it's recognized by biblical law, Jewish law. So where I'm getting to is this. If this mistress has been around and your wife knows about it, she's okay with it. Not that she's okay with it, but she's accepted it. Please elevate that relationship. Do not let her become your mistress any longer. Give her a marriage contract. She becomes your number two. Please give her your net worth, a portion of your net worth, so that she can have her decency given back to her. Because she's a human being. She was used for sexual pleasures. Now you have to give her her dignity. You can't throw her away and be like, "Oh, I have children now, and I have a family. You must just go away." Because she was not your one night stand. She was your consistent lover for many years. She's become a part of you. She's become your wife. So you have to give her a portion of your net worth. Basically, that's it from my side in terms with regards to polygamy, which is not equal to polyamory. What happens in the East is biblical and it's not the same as what happens in the West. If you want God, go to the East. If you want to walk away from God, go to the West. I hope you'll choose wisely. Until next time, when I answer another question, please hit like at the bottom of the video, hit like and subscribe and share this video with as many people as you think it will be useful for them to know these things. Shalom, shalom. See you later. Have a lovely week. We're in midweek. And if I don't make another video anytime soon, then Shabbat Shalom.